Greetings! You're here trying to answer the exact same question that has plagued astronomers, philosophers, budget ballers for decades. And that is there such a thing as a cheap M3? Now, I'm going to help answer this question by examining this running and driving bucket of neglect that I purchased for $11,000 US. Now that sounds like a mouth-wateringly cheap number for a V8 manual M3. Just wait till you see everything that is wrong with this car and how much the parts alone are going to cost to fix it. So now lock up your wallets. Let's begin. Ow! Yep, hood struts. Stay. That is one dirty, dirty looking air filter. Yuck. Take a look at that. I think this thing is genuinely disintegrating on itself. Here's all our spark plugs and coils. All right, next up we're going to address the elephant in the room, and that is the rod bearings. Obviously you can't see them, they're down in the belly of the motor. However, this engine with almost 90,000 kilometers or 170,000 miles has zero maintenance history and zero records of them ever being replaced. The previous owner, for a fact, guarantees me that in the last 10 years and 100,000 kilometers, they have not been changed. So that is going to have to be done, and that's a whopper. Obviously, you can get cheaper rod bearings and cheaper bolts. I'm going for BE bearings and ARP bolts because they're just proven to be the best and the easiest to install and the most reliable. Next, if we play count the leaks, valve cover gaskets, badly leaking, power steering, reservoir, surprisingly, and the lines not leaking, which is a bit of a shocker. I'm debating changing the water pump and the fuel injectors as preventative maintenance. I may do that later down the road, or I may decide, while I'm in here, I may as well do it all. The good news is that alternator is almost brand new. It's only a few months old from BMW, so ding ding, that's one thing that I don't need to change. Now before I close this hood, there is a cardinal sin that I need to rectify, and that is chrome in the engine bay of an M3. This is basically the equivalent of a guy having a tongue piercing. It's just wrong on every possible level. Don't you ever show your face here again. Aesthetically speaking, in the front, the bumper is pretty mangled and dinged up, but frankly, I'm not so bothered by that for the time being. This does bother me, so I might just replace that and respray it myself. But the headlight bracket here that holds on to this bar, this one's completely sheared off. This one is about to give, so that's not good. Whereas on this side, this one's intact and that one's intact. And I'm debating if I can even salvage these things or whether I just buy a new outer shell for the left and the right, because then these are going to be brand spanking new and super clear. I hate with a passion faded and yellowed headlight lenses, so this is really going to bother me way more than that scratched up bumper, which I can just hit up with some touch-up paint. Lastly, the M3 badge on the back is missing, and the front BMW emblem decided to eject itself at the car wash. Otherwise, several hours of paint polishing and correcting will bring this thing out to 8 out of 10 paint surface. All right, looking at the front driver's wheel, first things first, tires are completely shot, all 4 of them, so they gotta go. Also this rim, actually all 4 rims, horrible curb rash, and the center caps are just mangled. So I don't like gray on gray. I have seen these painted in original BMW silver, and they look very classy on the gray. So I'm gonna have these refinished. Now let's check for play. Up and down, seems okay. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And I bet you that is the tie rod over here on the front. Let's have a look on the other side. Over on the passenger side front, there's definitely some looseness. Not nearly as bad as the driver's side. Up and down feels okay. Now the rear's drivers. but the rear suspension feels pretty tight actually. Not too bad. Let's get the wheels off. Oh, wonderful. These are baked on. There we go. All right, so looking at the back, the rear rotors are pretty shot, pretty massive lip over here. So the rear rotors and the rear pads, that's got to go. Back here, the subframe, tons of surfaced rust, which again, pretty normal for a Canadian car. Mostly not winter driven though, so that's the only savior. Otherwise, the rear control arms and the bushings for the most part look okay. This car is running BC Racing coilovers, which I'm probably going to be changing. That spring looks pretty rusted. The strut is not leaking at least, so that's a plus. Back there you can see the sway bar bushing. That one's pretty toast. And this sway bar bushing over here looks pretty done as well. Those are pretty cheap to change, although that one back here is notoriously difficult without dropping the rear subframe. So I might be able to get away with leaving most of the rear suspension alone. Subframe bushings, at first glance, again, nothing majorly wrong with them, but at some point down the line, it would probably be a good idea to swap these out. These are notorious to go bad and make the rear end feel kind of loose when hard cornering. The story in the front is much better with respect to the brakes at least. These are relatively new, no lip whatsoever. Pads look totally fine. However, if we have a look at that shock up there, that is definite signs of a leaking front shock. Given that these are BC Racing El Cheapo Chinese coilovers, what I'm going to be doing, and I have the full stock suspension, is I'm going to put the stock springs with the stock OEM B4 Bilstein shocks back in here. So I'm going back to stock on the suspension for now. Now let's have a look underneath. Just as I was expecting, this tie rod over here is completely gone. It's pretty much not doing anything, so this one's gonna have to go. Otherwise, these bushings here, they don't look terrible. I might be able to get away with leaving most of this as is. The bushing for the sway bar though, that one I can see is kind of toast. And the sway bar end links, those look pretty done as well. I gotta go back to stock on those anyways because these are the cheapo BC Racing ones. But otherwise, no metal noises or clanging when I move these around. Everything appears to be decent for now. Again, the plan is I'm going to put this suspension back to stock, brand new struts, and some components like the tie rods. I'm going to drive it like that for a little bit, and then I will decide what I'm going to do from there next. The one thing I'm going to change on all four corners is stainless steel brake lines, because I will be pushing this car at some point, and these are 15 years old, and I don't want to risk it, so I'm going to get stainless steel all around. Moving to the leaky business end of the car, what you can see is over here this old felt that would have been here, kind of protecting this front part. As you can see over here, that's sheared off completely. So this is gone. I did manage to score some free kindling for the fireplace. That's nice. Surprisingly, all these power steering lines, for the most part, they appear to be dry. They're not really clipped in where they're supposed to be, and they were kind of hanging before, but massive oil spilling and pooling over here. Massive oil pooling over here. Oil literally dripping out of the drain plug hole and off of the bottom of the pan. Another thing to look out for is the clearance between this shield and where the bottom of the oil pan is super tight. So that is a surefire guarantee that the motor mounts are completely toast. So the motor mounts are going to go, and that's easily done when we're doing the rod bearings. Hopefully, this is mostly just oil pan related leaks and valve cover gasket leaks. As for this cover here, I can get a replacement felt one from BMW. They are notoriously prone to breaking and hanging. So there are aluminum aftermarket versions, which are a little bit more expensive and much sturdier. So again, I'm going to decide which one I'm going to go for. Let me know in the comments if you have experience with either of them. Moving to the back where the transmission is, this is the torn edge over here of the transmission cover, which is obviously missing. These are notoriously bad for ripping off and falling out. Again, this is one of those things that I need to replace in due time. Here you can see the car bottomed out nicely because it's got a nice scrape along the exhaust pipe, and it does not have a cat. This is running full catless system from the headers all the way to the back. And they did weld in the bungs for the O2 sensors, which is there, which is nice, which means I don't have to buy new O2 sensors. However, I will be putting this car back to stock with the front cats and the mid cats just to get rid of that check engine light. I'm going to pay a shop to re-weld the stock exhaust back on because it's just insanely loud and obnoxious, and I can't drive around like that. The other thing I noticed is the back of the transmission here is quite oily. Not sure where this is coming from, to be honest. I'm going to have to degrease this and clean it up and then get a better look. Maybe it's coming from like the output shaft or something like that over here. Otherwise, flex disc back there, not showing any cracks, so that's good. No major issues here. A little bit of surface rust on that exhaust support bracket, but that doesn't really matter. In the back, looking at the rear diff, surface rust, but bone dry, which is also good. Drive shaft, boots, looking dry as well. Also a good sign. The rear diff showing some road rash, courtesy of the dumped suspension. Thank you very much. And then moving on to the back to the quote-unquote Denon exhaust system. I don't know how you guys spell Denon, but I don't spell it M-A-G-N-A flow. I seem to recall it being spelled differently. I don't know, let me know in the comments below if you've seen a Denon exhaust look like this. I'm not a very big fan of this. I'm kind of disappointed it's not a real Denon. However, the stock E90, E92 exhaust is so quiet, I might just leave these rear muffler boxes as is and run with the full stock cats and resonators and see what it sounds like with these Denons in the back. I mean, I've heard of false advertising, but this is just next level stupidity. Denon tips welded onto MagnaFlow muffler boxes. That is a new low. Looking at the inside, the driver's seat, although mangled, with some color lock and some leather rejuvenation and repair, can easily come out looking really good. The steering wheel leather, that is well beyond saving. I'm going to get this rewrapped in BMW leather. Shift knob, also mangled, that's going to go. And the handbrake brute, that's going to go. That trim piece is missing, just a couple of pieces of clips. I've got the original aluminum piece. And otherwise, this thing just needs a really good shampoo and seats out detailing. So let's see how good your mental math was. That was just over $7,000 US in parts alone. Now, as a rough guide, double that number if you're going to pay a shop to do every single thing that I just talked about that's wrong with this car. So now you're talking about 15,000 US just to fix it and get it back running in stock condition. We're not talking about modifying, we're not talking about improving, which is just insane because the parts alone are 3/4 of what I paid for this car. So I think that answers the question once and for all. Cheap M3, there is definitely no such thing. Now, do I regret my decision? Hell no. And that's because this car is a legend and a future classic, and I just love it. So sometimes the heart wins over the mind, as they say. Now, as for the next episode on this V8 beast, it's going to have to wait because the E34 is just about to come back from the paint shop, and I'm going to completely finish that project, which I'm so excited about. For those of you who haven't seen that project, definitely check it out. I'll leave a link up here. Don't forget to subscribe because that car is in way worse condition than this when I bought it, and now it's going to come out looking stunning. Once we get the E34 done, I'm going to tackle the rod bearings and the complete bottom end surgery of this S65 motor, and then we're going to go piece by piece restoring it before the summer. Thank you all for watching. As always, adios.